If they cannot be purged, they must be contained. Balance restored. Balance restored.
No being will ever learn the truth of what we have done today. This is our darkest moment. Our eternal shame. Forever hidden, buried with these rings.
It must be done. We have no choice.
Is there an agreement? Consensus?
There is.
Hey guys, and welcome. The question of what's next for Halo Infinite is one that I think the entire community has right now, with the tease of a new faction in the Halo universe, the Endless, coming to us in Halo Infinite's DLC, along with the mystery behind people like Atriox, the UNSC Infinity, Captain Lasky, Halsey, Palmer, Roland. There's a lot of different questions that need answers to them. However, there's one character in the Halo universe that wasn't in Halo Infinite, wasn't in Halo 5, but was in Halo 4 that we'd only seen in that game and we haven't really seen him since in the games at all. That character? The Ur-Didact. Now, it was mentioned by 343 Industries that they wanted to expand on the Ur-Didact's in-game story and have him be in more Halo games. This was a comment they made just before Halo 4's release. However, after Halo 4, that was kind of the last time we've seen him. Today, I wanted to dive into a little bit of lore around the Ur-Didact, who he is, what he's done, and why he's such a significant figure in the Halo universe, along with giving some reasons and theories as to how he could return in Halo Infinite, because I strongly believe that it's possible that he could return, and you'll understand why as we get further on into this video, as it does start to add up a little bit. But guys, if you do go on to enjoy this video, a like would be very much appreciated, and make sure you are subscribed for brand new content coming pretty much every single day to the channel. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. To start with, I want to spend a bit of time deep diving into the lore of the Ur-Didact. There sometimes can be some confusion around the Ur-Didact and the Isodidact, with the Isodidact being present at the end of the Halo Infinite campaign within the legendary ending, and the Ur-Didact being the antagonist from Halo 4. Make sure you guys do go to check out the timestamps in the description down below to skip to whichever part of the video that you would like to, although I would suggest listening through just to get a full understanding and recap of the lore behind the Ur-Didact, which then gives you a better baseline to form your own opinions. The Ur-Didact was a Promethean, a member of the highest and most powerful class of warrior servants. He was trained by the bitterness of the vanquished, a legendary Promethean far older than the Didact himself. He earned his title, the Didact, when teaching students at the College of Strategic Defense of the Mantle. His students gave him the name because they found him to be strict and demanding as a teacher. The Didact was elevated to the rank of the Protector of the Ecumene around 2,000 years before the war with the humans. He had a romantic relationship with another Promethean commander, known as Endurance of Will, and would most likely have married her had he not met the Librarian, a life worker. Despite the unconventional practice of marrying outside one's own rate, the Didact ultimately married the Librarian. They lived on Nom Dagro, a world populated mainly by warrior servants, in a mansion designed by the Didact himself, huge in scale and style, very traditional for a warrior servant. The Didact wholeheartedly believed in the mantle the Forerunners held to protect life, and fervently opposed the Halo arrays as a sin beyond measure. The Didact was considered in his own time to be the supreme enemy of humans, viewing mankind as a grave threat to the Forerunner peace, and considering them to be extremely contentious, bigoted, and self-centered. However, in his own mind, this animosity was not driven by hatred or malice. Rather, it was a largely rational reaction to humanity's actions. After the Didact's encounter with the Gravemind, his attitudes became much more extreme, and he opted to wipe out humanity entirely as a potential threat to the Forerunner's supremacy. This new stance, combined with his desperation to stop the Flood, was behind his heinous actions towards the end of the Flood Forerunner War. Following the end of the war and his first discovery of the Flood, he advocated a policy of vigilance and research in the event of a Flood resurgence. He also proposed the construction of a significant number of shield worlds across the galaxy in order to monitor the galaxy for Flood outbreaks and provide military support should they occur. However, a faction of builders led by the Master Builder, Faber of Will and Might, proposed the construction of a series of super weapons to deal with the Flood instead, which had go on to be the Halo Rings. The Didact viewed the Halo Rings as an affront to the mantle, although the Didact and his Promethean allies managed to delay the construction of the Halos for several thousands of years. However, the Master Builder was eventually successful in convincing the Council to sanction their plans. The Didact's defeat was finalized around 98,445 25 BCE, when the Druidicals ruled against him. He was forced to stop his ongoing construction of the Shield Worlds, and was ordered to turn over all of the records and submit to the authority of the Master Builder. He refused, and was stripped of his power and forced to exile as a result. The Didact last met with his wife in their family residence on Nomdagro. Forced to enter a cryptum, he was led into meditative hibernation in a ritual overseen by an associate of Haruspis. During his last meal with the librarian, the Didact expressed hope in her abilities of foresight and hoped the humans under her care would not disappoint her. The Didact's cryptum was later placed by the librarian in a crater on Earth to hide it from the Master Builder and his allies. The war sphinxes containing the last essence of the Didact's children were placed to guard the cryptum. Over 1,000 years later, he was discovered and revived by a young forerunner named Bornstellar Make Eternal Lasting, who had come to Earth in search of a precursor relic. The Didact, whilst greatly displeased by his revival, deduced that it had been the work of his wife. The Didact's awakening summoned a fleet of forerunner ships in the area, but they were unable to pinpoint his location due to a baffler that cloaked the crater's central region. Instead of turning himself in, the Didact made a timely escape using a ship constructed from a design seed planted in the crater central mountain by the librarian, taking Bornstellar and the manipulous human guides, Chakas and Ryza, as well as his war sphinxes with him. Seeking to find out what happened in his absence, the Didact set course for Sharam Hakor, where he discovered that one of the Master Builder's halos had already been tested, eradicating all sentient life, as well as a precursor structure in the system. Upon landing on Sharam Hakor, the Didact discovered that the Primordial had escaped its time lock, and was now nowhere to be found. Before arriving in San Shayum, the Didact performed a brevet mutation on the young Manipula to allow him access to the domain. With the mutation, the Didact transferred his imprint, containing his consciousness along with all of his memories and knowledge, to Bornstellar. However, in orbit, the Didact's ship was intercepted and dismantled by the Master Builder's forces, who had been present in the system quelling a San Shayum rebellion. Didact and the others were taken prisoners. In the subsequent interrogations, the Didact refused to divulge information on the Shield Worlds or the control codes for the Contender class Ancillars, although other forerunners, including the Librarian, believed that the Didact had been executed. The Master Builder had in fact left him, along with a number of other forerunners, to die, confined in stasis bubbles or a derelict ship within a flood-controlled system. Meanwhile, the Didact's personality imprint on Bornstellar's body took full control of the Manipula, effectively making him a copy and paste of the Didact. After surviving the assault by Mendicant Bias on the capital, Bornstellar reunited with the Librarian on the Greater Ark. In the absence of the Didact, Bornstellar, known as the Didact, resumed the Didact's duties as Supreme Commander of the Forerunner military due to the present threat of the Flood. The Didact effectively existed as two individuals during the final days of the Flood Forerunner War, his original self as well as his imprinted consciousness on the young Forerunner known as Bornstellar. To differentiate these two incarnations, the original Didact was referred to as the Ur-Didact, whilst the other incarnation was known as the Didact. The Ur-Didact was eventually exiled on Requiem, not to be awakened until 2557. Meanwhile, the Didact served until the final days of the Flood conflict and was responsible for the activation of the Halo array. After the Ur-Didact was released from his cryptum many millennia later, he resumed his war against humanity in Halo 4. The 100,000 years the Didact spent locked away in a meditative hibernation on Requiem, it did nothing to heal him psychologically or soften his grudge against humanity. Upon being reawakened by the Chief, he remained as determined as ever to ensure the Forerunner supremacy, and resolved to composing the entire human race to finish what he started all those ages ago. However, this raging overconfidence in his abilities led to his defeat at the hands of the Master Chief twice, the first being his fall into slipspace towards the end of Halo 4, and the second leading to his physical body being destroyed by the Composer, the very device which he had planned to enslave humanity. The Composers were originally designed as a means by which to extract the mental pattern, sort of commonly known as an essence, of a biological being of sufficient neural complexity and converting it into data by broadcasting high energy fields. The process, which was not fully understood by even the Forerunner creators, utilized neural physics, a science mastered by the Precursors, one of select few Forerunner technologies to do so. According to the original design, the Composers would allow Forerunners to transfer their essence into younger bodies or directly into the domain's vast realms of information. The technology was worked on in obscurity for centuries. In the latter days of the Human Forerunner Wars, after the Forerunners' first contact with the Flood, the Master Builder Faber took notes of the Composer and planned to use the device to cure the parasite's victims. The plan was to save those inflicted by the Flood by scanning their patterns and removing any traces of the Flood from the digital essence, which would then be imprinted on a new, artificially constructed biological body devoid of the Flood infection, which would go on to be the Prometheans. However, the process was highly flawed. In addition to being extremely painful to the individuals undergoing the process, all attempts to restore the essence to the biological form failed, as the artificial bodies would quickly decay and inevitably die. For this reason, the Forerunners quickly abandoned the composers after their first experiments. I hope I didn't lose you through any of that explanation, but to preface, that was scratching the surface of the lore behind the Ur-Didact. There is so much more that we could go into, but just to save your guys' sanity, we're going to cap it off there. But it just goes on to show that the Ur-Didact has a huge part in the Halo universe's lore, and his journey in Halo 4, although a lot of people seem to think it was very underwhelming, was an interesting one to say the least. With 343 not killing him off, it leaves him open to a return. In the Halo universe, I would say at the moment, we have two main characters which are both completely within the Forerunner domain. One is dead as far as we know, and the other one was just digitized within it. The first one, Cortana, as far as we know, who sacrificed herself within Halo Infinite, and then two, the Ur-Didact, who was composed and digitized into the Forerunner domain. Now, the Ur-Didact was very stubborn when it came to the mantle of responsibility, similar to Cortana in that sense as well. The Ur-Didact's overall goal was Forerunner supremacy. He believed heavily that the Forerunners are the rightful holders of the mantle, believed that humanity are not worthy of 1. The mantle, and 2. are an inferior and immature species, and wants them wiped out, along with the Flood. This actually contradicts a lot of the Halo Infinite story quite a bit, to be honest, and the overall purpose of the Endless and the Harbinger that we know so far is that the Endless are the remnants of the Precursors who are the rightful holders of the mantle of responsibility. However, the Forerunners inflicted genocide upon the Precursors, and the Forerunners took the mantle of responsibility for themselves, later passing it down to humans, or known as the Reclaimers. The Endless essentially want to take the mantle back from humanity. As the Harbinger says, the Forerunner lies, lying about them being the holders of the mantle of responsibility, which will probably be the plot of DLC 1. But how could the Ur-Didact return? Is it even possible? Would it even make sense? Well, there are two ways that I think he could return that could make for a pretty interesting plot in DLC. Do I think it will be in DLC 1 or DLC 2 that he'll return? Absolutely not. But after this, I do think there's a possibility that he will return. Let me explain why I believe this. In DLC 1, we already have so many unanswered questions about the campaign story. I mean, we need answers to things like Atriox, the Endless, the Infinity, the main characters. How did Cortana destroy the ring? Is she dead completely? What's the weapon's name? All of these different things that we don't really know, that we need to understand before the story can be expanded. So DLC 1 for me will be an expansion on the story. Do you really think that along with answering all of those questions, along with adding another mystery, which is the Ur-Didact, would be a good thing? I think it would confuse the hell out of the community. I don't think it would be good. What about DLC 2? I still don't think so. As mentioned in DLC 1, all of the above will be answered and at least mentioned in some capacity. I think at the end of DLC 1 we'll see the intentions of the Endless and what they want to do, setting it up for DLC 2 where we see what they actually want to achieve, where the story then expands to and leads on to DLC 3, which is where shit's gonna get real. I think DLC 3, the Flood, will return, or at least be hinted at a return in DLC 4. But I do think that the Flood could be summoned and released by the Endless. I have a full video explaining the reasons why I believe this is the case. I'll leave it in the description down below, so make sure you go check it out if you want to know more about that, but it's very interesting. For me, this would be a perfect time for the Ur-Didact to return if they were going to put him back into the game. One, there would be another Flood outbreak, which the Ur-Didact would want to try and wipe out for good, along with fighting against the Endless to prevent them from regaining the rights to the mantle. And then humanity. They will be fighting to prevent the Flood outbreak and to prevent the Endless from gaining overall control of the Halo and the universe in general. It could get messy and confusing with there being so many things going on, but I wouldn't say that it's not possible for it to happen. What could happen, which could make for a really interesting plot, is Atriox and the Endless could work together to fight against humanity initially. Atriox or the Endless somehow came across the Forerunner domain or captured a Just and Resolution and gained details around the Didact and that he's within the Forerunner domain, his goals and his morals from old, and that he doesn't like humanity, which is perfect for them at the time because humanity is their biggest threat, and if they have a Didact on their side to fight against humanity with them, then it's basically a win-win for them. They could free the Didact somehow, I don't know how, but this is just theory. They could free the Didact, lie about their end goal, and say that if humanity are wiped out, the Forerunners will reign supreme. feeding the Didact's hatred for humanity, giving him closure on that part of his story, and giving him the motivation to help Atriox, the Banished, and the Endless out. Throughout the journey, the Endless are working to free the Flood, but they don't want to say anything, and my reasons for this is that the Flood and the Endless are of origin of the precursors, so potentially they could work together or have some linking in with each other. Again, this is just complete speculation, but go check my video out previously to discuss all of this and goes into detail with everything, and it does kind of make a bit of sense, so we'll give it a bit of background onto this theory as well. But the Endless could be secretively working to free the Flood that the Banished don't know about, and also the Didact don't know about, and they could use the Didact to free the Flood without him really knowing, causing him to now be fighting against the Endless, and also the Banished to be leaving the side of the Endless and fighting against the Flood and the Endless as well. The Endless and the Flood can team together, humanity and the Banished can also team together, but, well, this is where it gets interesting right here. The Didact, humanity and the Banished all have the same goal when it comes to the Flood. Shit will hit the fan if they are freed and they leave the ring, so maybe a temporary alliance could be formed between the three of them to fight against the Endless and the Flood. Once they're weakened, the Didact could turn on the Chief, or with time spent in the domain, you never know, he could have learned from and forgiven humanity. I always put this reference into my videos when going back to this, but you've also got to take into consideration the Covenant and the Arbiter from Halo 2, and then going into Halo 3. The Arbiter did not like the humans. It's no surprise or no secret. The Arbiter killed over 1 billion human lives, which for anyone really is absolutely unforgivable, but in Halo 3 he's still managed to team up with humanity and they were fine with it. These temporary alliances are there to try and benefit each faction. If the Covenant and humanity didn't team up together, the war could have looked extremely different. This is my same theory with Atriox as well. Atriox does not hate humanity. He's even offered to recruit humans if they follow the same path as him in some ways. Atriox would want one thing, and that's for the Banished to be supreme or to win the war. And if that does mean teaming up with the enemy with a temporary alliance, I can't see why he wouldn't do that. And that's the same with the Ur-Didact. The worst thing in the world is for the Flood to be freed, because it basically means you've got to fire these Halo rings and it will take out all life. That's the last resort. So why would the Ur-Didact not put everything aside for now in order to try and contain the Flood or wipe them out for good? Again, it's just something to think about, something to ponder. It's very interesting when you put it in that way, and that's the way I think about things now. If the Arbiter didn't team up with humanity, Halo 3 would be a completely different game. In the future, if Atriox doesn't team up with humanity and this theory is somewhat correct, then it could be a completely different outcome. If you've ever heard the term keep your friends close but enemies closer, this is exactly what I'm referring to. But the truth is, I've got no idea, but these are some suggestions on things that could happen and some of the theories that I think could be very interesting to think about. But of course, the question of will it happen is a completely different story. But guys, what are your thoughts and opinions on the Ur-Didact returning to Halo Infinite? It's definitely an open-ended question, and it wouldn't surprise me if he did return sometime in the future. But guys, I hope you did go on to enjoy this video. If you did, be sure to drop a like and subscribe down below for more content coming pretty much every single day. And yeah, hope you have a good rest of your day, guys. Speak soon and take care.